My apologies because of a eye infection. I have to wear these odd-looking glasses. Uh, and I would start with a disclaimer that if I say that I know much about this particular field of small-scale fisheries, then probably I would be doing a great injustice. However, in some of the projects, I have been exposed to fishing communities, and my focus in this very short talk is going to be on certain things related to well-being and a couple of insights that probably I would like to share. The rest of the things probably are well known to everyone here. So, for people who are not familiar with the concept of well-being or a field of happiness, it's a new thing which has emerged since the late 1990s and has gradually emerged in the last 25-30 years as a very significant field. When we are looking at the fields of sociology, anthropology, and related areas, we have concepts about well-being as in the context of case of the theory of McGregor and Sarah White. When we are talking about psychological components, we have concept of PERMA by Martin Seligman, or we have the subjective well-being concepts. Uh, we also have different ways of administering it in different contexts. For instance, the gross national happiness concept, which has been primarily used by Bhutan and is gradually being used in other places as well, looks at certain dimensions of well-being. So the reason for just starting with this is to share that one can think in terms of that which gives a sense of satisfaction over a long period of time. These could be material things. This could also be things which are related to our mind. So we could be materially well off, but unhappy mentally. We could be mentally well off, but materially in a poor situation. We could have a balance between the two. There could be also a relationship between the two in the sense that if I'm materially doing well, probably I'm also going to do emotionally, mentally well, and the vice versa. Could be. So these are the areas which are explored. What I'm trying to start off with are some very basic components. I'm trying to refer to a recent report by Sarah White and friends, where they've explored rural India, especially the poor community and the concept of well-being. And the reason for taking it up is because it is relevant to the context of the rural poor and to the poor who are in the periphery of the society. And it is also relevant for the fishing communities. So although I take a generic take right at the beginning, taking a larger community, probably some of the points made here would be relevant for fishing communities as well. So when we are looking at where well-being is to be found, we might look at economic resources, agencies and participation, I mean, in terms of how somebody is doing in one's personal life, social connectivities, close relationships, mental health, and the kinds of values and meanings one derives from one's life. There can be mediators which influence these, like economic status could influence not only material well-being, as well as it could also influence inner well-being. You could have gender and marital status. For instance, we find that single women are generally relatively less happy than women who are married in poorer communities. And for instance, single women have a stronger uh, reliance on community network rather than at a personal level. It is found that villages and village life and community life has its significance and relevance in the context of inner well-being. And when it comes to what are the components which enhance well-being in these communities and in these contexts, some of these happen to be the small rights which have been promised to them by the governments and the policymakers. Food security, which is very significant, even when their ability to produce is something which is compromised. When they get the rice and ration, there is a great degree of sense of security. The policies and interventions by the governments and of course the NGOs which intervene and in most cases in a very positive way. Now, friends, what I would like to say is that if you're looking at the background, that these are some of the well-being indicators, these are some of the well-being mediators, these are the factors which affect well-being, or if you're looking at what helps or hinders well-being, then based on my experience, my field visits mostly in coastal Orissa and very few places in Bengal, we find that we find that excuse me, we find that in the context of economic components, we have issues like environmental disaster, COVID, which are creating significant problems, especially in the context of well-being. And for fisheries as well, because you see that with the issue of contact, with the issue of touch, and sanitization of goods, their well-being is significantly affected. Governance and policy need not be highlighted. Community is a very, very significant aspect where formal and informal organizations and relationships keep on playing a significant role, as we have found in various contexts, as along with our field studies. And of course, the concept of identity, the concept of current identity, migration, and the identities which keep on changing. We will talk about that little elaborately a little later. And locational identity, like fishing rights and other related areas. However, what I would like to focus on in this very brief talk would be just a couple of things which I find interesting and probably which would be of some interest to many of the people here who know most of the other things. One of the important things is that economic change and change in well-being drivers, cultural change, aspirations, drivers, conflict, and identity. So the fundamental thing I would like to say is that we find that we are in the middle of a societal flux, a change, and these changes affect the identities of the people. And when these affect the identities of the people, their orientations, their perceptions about themselves and things, that also significantly affects their well-being. And this significantly is to be found in many of the fishing communities in near Chilka that we had visited. I'll give you a small example. When we are talking about social comparison, there is a story in the Bhagavad Puran, which talks about a person getting a boon from Lord Vishnu, that he can wish for anything and he will get it. But the condition is that his neighbor will get double the amount. And in spite of being happy that if he asks for a pot of gold, he will get it, he's unhappy that when he asks for a pot of gold without working for it, his neighbor gets 2 pots of gold. His unhappiness reaches the zenith because he has one grandson, his neighbor has 2 grandsons, until one day he decides that he would wish that he loses one of his eyes. And then, of course, you know that the other person loses both his eyes. So
excuse me,
here
Professor,
is one. Yes.
You have 2 more minutes.
Thank you very much. So this is the aspect of social comparison. And a more recent phenomena is where conspicuous consumption is playing a significant role in the perception of well-being, which is that people would give up taking decent food and buy a mobile instead. And this is where you see that identity politics comes in a significant way, because you see that people are interested in trying to display their prestige, their social status, and they feel that when they do these things, they are probably better off in society, and they compromise on other things, and this leads to various kinds of ill-being in these particular contexts. The reason for bringing in these examples is to tell that if when we visited the Chilka Lagoon, we found that many of the fishing communities were undergoing these kinds of transformations, where these changes were taking place, and the concept of well-being or ill-being was getting modified by such changes and fluxes which were taking place. So the reason for bringing it in is to realize that in different corners of these fishing communities, this identity crisis, changing identities, younger generation not being willing to stay with the old identities. These are some of the fundamental issues that are coming up. There is just a couple of points I would make at the end because of shortage of time. One is that probably if you are looking at possible ways and positive interventions, policies need to be identity sensitive. I remember the last time we visited, we were told that the government is now trying to give goats to the fishermen so that their lifestyle, I mean, their sustainability is based on goats and hens and doing business with them. So here you find that this policy is not identity sensitive. Probably we need identity sensitive policies from the government. That is something very often missing. The other thing, which is an internal driver, which probably we can fall back on, is the sense of community wisdom. The other things are well known to all of us. But this community wisdom is something which is not getting preserved, which is a part of our oral tradition, a part of the community oral culture. And probably there must be strategies to see that these are also put in place. The other drivers, external and internal, are well known to all of us. And I felt that these 3 points which I made, one about the flux, the changing, the transforming communities, the uh, concept of, I mean, identity sensitive policies and community wisdom could be three interesting concepts which could be brought into the discussion. Thank you very much.